This is Sandy here with Look at Israel again. And we're going to do a quick little video on the ceasefire currently happening. And we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. I hope I can get it all in one video. May have to break it up if it gets too long. Anyway, let's talk about the good of the ceasefire deal. And I will, as we're going through the good, the bad, and the ugly, I'll kind of explain the deal as we go through, because it can be a little fuzzy. It can be a little confusing as to what's actually happening. So the good, and this is amazing. All the live hostages are scheduled to come home. That is as good as it gets, folks. That's amazing. So where we stand right now is Hamas has agreed to the ceasefire, and Israel has agreed to the ceasefire, estimating Sunday at 10 p.m. and Monday at 10 p.m. Somewhere in that timeline is when we're going to see the hostages returned. Please, please, Lord, let it happen. So all live hostages are scheduled to come home. And I want to bring up one more thing. If the hostages actually come home at the end of that 72 hours on a Jewish holiday, and it's called Simchat Torah. And it is a celebration that they have gone through one whole year of reading the Torah, a really big, important part of the Jewish scriptures, part of the Bible. So why is that significant? It's the end of Sukkot, which is the Feast of Booths or Feast of Tabernacles. They're having that right now. So at the end of the last day of the Feast of Booths, the Feast of Sukkot, is Simchat Torah, which is they celebrate that they finished a big chunk of the Bible. Isn't that amazing? Wouldn't that be great if we had that in America? So that date 2 years ago is when the hostages were taken. Now, it can kind of be confusing because you're like, well, wait, that was on October 7th. It'll be like the 13th. It won't be October 7th, basically. So how can you say it's a, exact 2 year? Well, in America, we go by a solar calendar, pretty much. Our 365 days and a quarter, which is why we have leap year every so few years to get all caught up. But Israel goes on a Hebrew calendar, and their calendar is lunar, so it's a little bit off from ours. The feasts don't always land on the same date. That's why we never know what date Passover is or Easter, Resurrection Sunday in the U.S. because, it's not based on a date. It's kind of like how Thanksgiving is always the third Thursday of November. We're not sure what the date's going to be, right? So anyway, that's really significant. If the hostages are released this coming Monday, it will be 2 years from the date that they were taken. That's pretty incredible. We don't trust Hamas until we can back up their words with their actions, because they lie a lot. They're terrorists. And so it's really important for us to not do what Enoch Wolf calls West-splaining. Instead of mansplaining, you're West-splaining. You look at what Hamas and other terrorist groups say, and you go, well, gosh, they don't really mean that. They don't really mean they want to completely wipe out the state of Israel and kill all the Jews. They're just saying that's just their rhetoric. They just mean that they want their own state. That's all they mean. So, we got to be careful with Hamas. We got to be careful that we're not West-splaining or projecting our values on them, or, filtering what they say through our value system, because they have a very different value system. So don't totally rejoice yet. Keep praying. We got to keep praying that these hostages actually get released when they're supposed to, scheduled to. Because you got to remember that a lot of these guys on the ground in Gaza, a lot of the only ones that are left are young. These are not your 30, 40, 50-year-old terrorists. These are youngins. And, we've all been young and dumb and done kind of crazy things. So we don't want them going, "Oh, we don't care what has been agreed to. We're not doing it," and, shooting their guns off in the air or whatever. We want them to follow what their leadership in these negotiations in Egypt has agreed to. So that is still something we need to pray for. We also need to pray for the protection of the hostages during this time period. We don't want them to be abused. We don't want them to be injured or hurt any more than they already are before they get released. And we need to pray that they definitely get released. So that is amazing. The second part of the good that is amazing is that all the hostages are set to be released at once. That is unheard of. Here's Hamas's game plan. Go kidnap a bunch of Israelis. And we know that, Hamas says, you Israelis, you value life, but we love death. They actually say that. So they know that the Israeli mindset, the Jewish mindset, is one of life and love and laughter and, celebration. So Israelis will go to incredible lengths. They'll go to the ends of the earth to rescue their people. And Hamas, like the evil terrorists they are, they use Israel's good values against them. So they take hostages and they piecemeal them out. "Oh, you want your hostages back? Oh, okay. Oh, you want all of them? Oh, yeah. Well, we have 20, but we're willing to give you 5. We'll give you 5. How about that?" And you let 500 convicted terrorists go for these 5 Israeli hostages. It's ridiculous. But that's how they think. But this time, enough pressure was placed on Hamas by Egypt, by Qatar, by Turkey even, by Jordan. The whole Arab world is putting pressure on Hamas to just get this deal done. This is your last best chance to get out alive. This is it. You're not getting any better deal than this. That's what they've been telling them in Egypt at these negotiations. So the fact that we could get all the hostages released at one time, that's astounding. That is amazing. That's part of the good. Another part of the good, number 3, the third really good thing about this deal is that Hamas is totally defeated. Now, when I say that Hamas is totally defeated, of course I don't mean every Hamas terrorist is dead or, in jail or whatever. Of course, you're not going to defeat an ideology. It's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that Hamas is defeated as the ruler in Gaza. That is over. That is done. Hamas's goal is the destruction of Israel. Their goal is not a state. That's not their goal. And that's another good thing. That's actually point number 4, that Israel's still standing. But what happens is the hostages are the only reason that Hamas is not already completely obliterated. They've been their bargaining chip. The hostages have been Hamas's bargaining chip. They've been their human shields, in addition to their own Gazan civilians being used as human shields. And having the hostages back is amazing as it relates to the defeat of Hamas, because so this is only the first part of this ceasefire. The other parts haven't necessarily, haven't necessarily been negotiated yet. getting the hostages back in the first step all at once proves that Hamas is defeated, because they don't have any power after that. Their power's over. Now, if they give all the hostages back and then Hamas, the rest of the, negotiations keep going, Hamas is, flipping tables. I don't like this, I'm out of here. And they start firing rockets at Israel again. There's no hostages to worry about. Israel will still warn civilians like they do. They will still work really hard to not kill civilians. But Israel will not have to worry about harming the hostages when they go after Hamas. That's how we know Hamas is defeated. The fourth one, like I said, is Hamas's goal is the destruction of Israel. They will tell you that. It's in their charter. It's literally in their charter. Now, they have two messages. One for the Arabic-speaking world, and they have another message for naive and uninformed Westerners. And that is, we just want a state. We just want our own state. Their goal is not a state. If their goal was a state, they would have already had it. Not only the 5 times that it was offered up to 2000 and 2008, but Israel's pullout from Gaza in 2005 gave them a de facto state. It was like a test for Israel. Let's pull out. Let's give them total control of Gaza. And let's see what they do with it. What did they do with it? There wasn't a blockade at that point, so I don't want to hear that. There was not a blockade. There was a checkpoint, of course. There's a checkpoint between Gaza and Egypt. There's a checkpoint between, Canada and America. Having a checkpoint is not insulting, and it's not, a war crime or a crime against humanity. But there was not a blockade yet in 2005 when Israel pulled out of Gaza. Israel pulled out of Gaza so hardcore, they even dug up the Jewish graves in the cemetery, and they removed Jewish bodies and corpses from the cemetery. Then the Gazans elected Hamas, and they started firing rockets. Within a year, they were at war, and Israel had to put the blockade in of weapons at that point. Blockade also is not like they didn't blockade every single thing into Gaza. There's business in Gaza. There are export businesses in Gaza, import businesses. They have restaurants. They have, shops where you can go and buy clothes and cars and all kinds of stuff. So, anyway, their goal is not a state, because they could have had one multiple times over, and they even did have a de facto state from 2005, and they just turned it into a terror base. Their goal is the destruction of Israel. So another good thing from this, number 4, I believe we're on, is Hamas's goal of destruction of Israel did not happen. But not only was Israel not destroyed, a lot of good things happened with this, really, as a result of this war. Hamas is defeated. They will not rule in Gaza. Of course, there will be, some members of Hamas. There will be the ideology. You can't destroy that so quickly. But Hamas will not rule in Gaza now or in the future. Also, throughout these last 2 years, Hezbollah has been completely knocked back. They're still there. They still exist, but not like they did. Not after Beepergate and, all the other attacks that happened to Hezbollah. Lebanon, because Hezbollah is being defeated and having their power, so much of their power taken away, Lebanon, the actual government of Lebanon, is almost on the brink of getting control of their country back. And they're talking about a peace deal with Israel. Iran's sanctions are back in place, and Iran's nuclear program has been set back tremendously. And the IDF has grown as a military. They have developed new strategies, new tactics. They've actually created a new kind of warfare, which is troops above the ground and troops under the ground in tunnels, kind of clearing the battlefield simultaneously. They've tested American and Israeli weapons and drones and surveillance systems. So they have just grown as a military, and now they're free to go take care of the Houthis, because that has to happen next. All that's happened in the last 2 years, and it's coming to an end now. This part, the war of Israel trying to exist in peace is not even over, but they have made a lot of progress in this 2-year period, because not only did they not, were not destroyed by Hamas, they're making progress. Number 5, good thing, is that the Arab world pressured Hamas to accept this ceasefire. This is big. Qatar was the funder of Hamas, and it would shelter the Hamas leadership. Hamas leadership so corrupt, they're skimming off the top of all of this humanitarian aid they get, the billions, and Hamas leadership lived in luxury in Qatar, and Qatar was funding and sheltering Hamas. Egypt was helping funnel weapons into Gaza to Hamas through their border, the tunnels underground. And even though Egypt has a peace treaty with Israel, it's kind of like a hot peace. Like, it's not great. They still don't like Israel. And then Turkey pressured Hamas to take this deal. And Erdogan says that the Zionist entity shouldn't exist. That's what they call Israel. And Erdogan says that Hamas aren't terrorists, they're just freedom fighters. So that's amazing that Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey all pressured Hamas to take this deal. The whole Arab world was pressuring Hamas to take this deal. They told him, this is it. You're never going to see a better deal than this, so you better take it. That's big, to have those countries pressuring Hamas to take this ceasefire. The number 6 really good thing that happened in this is that Hamas will no longer rule in Gaza. That is for sure. That is certain. Israel and the U.S. have said absolutely not, nor the Palestinian Authority. So let's see if that second part gets implemented. But as of right now, Hamas will not rule in Gaza. That's a non-negotiable for Israel. Then the 7th really good thing is there's a terrorist named, his last name is Barghouti. And he is just a wicked, wicked, wicked terrorist mastermind. And Hamas had the gall to say, well, as we release your hostages, we want Barghouti released with the prisoners. And Israel said, no, he's not getting out. And that's a really good thing. He's kind of like a Yahya Sinwar character. So, to have another mastermind let loose is not a good thing. So that's a really good thing that he will not be released. Number 8 is that this is only the first phase. So in this first phase, we're getting the hostages back, which will take away Hamas's power. So Israel does not have to agree to things that could be really harmful to it in this first phase. The rest of it can be negotiated. In other words, they didn't have to sign on the dotted line for a whole bunch of bad stuff just to get their hostages out. They're going to get their hostages out, and then they can negotiate all the other stuff, like who will rule in Gaza and, how much of Israel's soldiers and when, they will pull out, that kind of thing. And number 9 which is a part of this, is that the IDF can remain in parts of Gaza to ensure no weapons smuggling and to ensure, Hamas or Hamas-like elements don't take over again. So right now, the IDF is going to pull back a little bit once these hostages are released. And they're going to maintain the Philadelphia corridor, which is between Gaza and Egypt, to make sure no weapons are smuggling. And they're surrounding the whole perimeter of Gaza. So that's amazing. That's the good. The bad is, not as much. Praise God. The bad is that there will be, I think the number right now is about 2,000 prisoners released. And 250 of them have, life sentences for murder, for terrorism. So that's not good. That's definitely bad. And something else that's bad is that the Hamas leadership in Gaza, they're allowed to live. From my viewpoint, that's a bad thing. They should either have been killed in battle or be in prison, but they're going to be allowed to live. They're trying to negotiate that they can keep their weapons and that kind of thing. And Israel's like, no, you're not going to be able to keep your weapons. But, that's a bummer because they will have to be dealt with again. Another bad thing is this ceasefire cannot guarantee the return of the remains of the dead hostages, unfortunately. And, you can look at that and go, oh, well, gosh, you got the live ones back. And that is true. But imagine if you never had the body of your loved one to bury and to give you closure and to really help in the grieving process. So it is a big deal. And they're going to try to get as many of their remains back as possible, but they can't guarantee that they will get all of them. And that's really hard. So we definitely need to pray for that too. And then the part of the bad is the threats of Israel are not over. I mentioned this a minute ago, but, Erdogan still wants Israel destroyed. Egypt has this peace, but they don't love Israel whatsoever. And there's been a big military buildup in Egypt over the last year, and people are not quite sure what's going on with that. So stay tuned. And then, Qatar is still anti-Israel, anti-Western. They're still funding our universities. They're still funding anti-Semitism in our universities. They still run Al Jazeera, which is their propaganda arm, which is just trash. And, we still have Iran. Good old Iran, whose three top goals are the destruction of Israel, the destruction of Great Britain, and the destruction of the United States. And they're going to still try to, fund Israel's haters and Israel's enemies. So, that's a quick little video about the good and the bad. I don't think I'm going to have time to do the ugly in this video. I'm going to have to do it in a different video. But I do want to end real quick with how this came about. How did this ceasefire? And the number one thing that we know, of course, is the Lord. The Lord is bringing this about. This is an answer to prayer. But what he has done is he has used Israel Defense Force. The destruction of Gaza and the killing of so many Hamas leaders is what has brought this about. Military pressure on Hamas is what has brought them to their knees and brought them to this negotiating table. There's a little bit more, though, behind the scenes, which I think is interesting. So when Israel struck the Hamas leadership about a month ago in Doha, Qatar, that was pretty key. And that also has played into this ceasefire happening. Excuse me, I'm taking a little sip here. When Israel struck Hamas's leadership in Doha, Qatar, it was a sign. They did kill some. They killed some top leadership, but they didn't kill all of them. And it was to shake up Qatar and to shake up Hamas. Now, Qatar has the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East. Afterwards, Trump came out and, oh, I didn't know about this, and oh, I'm unhappy with Netanyahu. I think that's all, I think that's an act. I could be totally wrong, and I have no way of proving this, so I'm going to be really upfront about that. But I believe that was a part of the plan because it really shook up Qatar. The next day after that hit, the premier of Qatar got on a flight to the United States to meet with Trump. I don't believe that Israel would have fired missiles, weapons, hot weapons into Qatar, into any nation with the largest military base in the region there. Our military base saw those weapons incoming. They knew what was happening. Even if they didn't have, days or weeks or hours notice what was happening, they knew once they saw the inbound missiles. So I think that shook Qatar up. And it gave Trump the ability to say, yeah, looks like time's up for Hamas. You need to help us pressure Hamas to take this deal. So I believe that's what happened. I believe Trump gave Israel the green light to do that. If they didn't give Israel the green light, I think Trump saw that as an advantageous development and said, we can use this to pressure Qatar, because it scared Qatar. It's kind of like good cop, bad cop. Netanyahu's the bad cop, firing missiles away at Qatar. And Trump's kind of the good cop, like, no, calm down, Netanyahu. What are you doing? You're out of control. And, it's okay, Qatar. We'll protect you. But you've got to pressure Hamas to take a ceasefire. And then Trump backing Israel publicly. Yeah, he scolded Netanyahu, but he publicly said about this ceasefire, if Hamas doesn't say yes to this and release all the hostages at once, Israel's going to have to do what Israel's going to have to do. That's backing. That's backing Israel. And then Trump pressured Turkey with the possibility of us helping them update their fighter jets. They have our fighter jets already, but they have older versions. It's kind of a bummer because those fighter jets, whatever they get from us, are probably going to be used in the future to attack Israel. But anyway, that's kind of how it came to be. But it never would have started if Israel had not completely decimated Gaza. And they had to decimate Gaza. Gaza is a lot like Imperial Japan in World War II. Warrior culture, a death cult with a religious element. Eastern tribal society where what the head says goes, no questions. And Japan, and they both praise martyrdom and will fight to the death. Well, Imperial Japan had to be absolutely obliterated. They had to just have their land totally decimated before they would come to the bargaining table. The firebombing of Tokyo was horrible. One atomic bomb, they still didn't come to the negotiating table. It took 2 atomic weapons. And Gaza actually is coming out, they're 90% of the buildings are destroyed, but I don't even think that's been enough for them. I think having the Hamas fighters be killed and having Israel take so much territory in Gaza, I think that's what's done it. But anyway, Thank you for listening to my ceasefire breakdown of the good, the bad, and the ugly to come. And I hope you have a great night. Let's keep praying for this ceasefire. Keep praying for the hostages to be protected before they're released, and pray that they are actually released this coming Monday. Might be Tuesday morning for us, or might be Monday morning or Sunday night for us. I get confused on the whole dateline thing. But anyway, yeah, let's keep praying and remember it's God's land. He's in control, and we serve a big God. Look at what he's accomplished in the last 2 years. Okay, see you in another video. Bye.